Brothers, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your Saturday again to join us and be a part of our 2023 Housing Conference. Before we wrap, I will turn the mic over to John, see if there's any open discussion, any questions about any topics covered today or any information shared, and then we'll close as appropriately. So.
Thank you, Dio. Presenters, partners, brothers, thank you all for what you do for your chapters in Phi Gamma Delta. Thanks for your time this afternoon. This session is devised for you to ask questions of each other, ask questions of us, follow up on items that maybe have been on your mind since even Rob spoke earlier today, and an opportunity for you to provide us with feedback on programming that you'd like to see, on maybe structure of this event and what you'd like to see differently in future events. We really want to know how we can best serve you. So all your mics are open, so let us know. Ask questions.
I'll ask a question. I'm good at that, right, Dio? One of the problems we have at Penn State is the influx of brand new apartment buildings. And there's no way our fraternity house, at 125 years old, can compete with the amenities and so forth. And in relation to that problem, most of our seniors move out, don't want to live in a house. Even some of the juniors don't want to. And unfortunately, at Penn State, we have a delayed rush where we can't rush till second semester freshman year. And the apartments in October, first semester, have a big party and invite all the freshmen to sign apartment leases before they even can rush a fraternity. Anyway, we charge our out-of-house brothers a fee and also a security deposit. And an awful lot of them ignore it, don't pay it, say to the chapter treasurer, disaffiliate me, I don't care, I'm not paying. And the chapter treasurer might come back to me because I write most of our contracts or leases. And I tell them, look, if they owe a lot, it might be worth it. If they don't owe a lot and your finances are stable, the minute you disaffiliate them, not only does Gamma Phi, but Phi Gamma Delta loses a graduate, loses an alumni, which none of us want to do. So I'd kind of like to hear from some other House Corporation people, or I don't know, maybe some BCA members that might be more involved with the chapters, of ways to collect funds for or from brothers that live out of house. We pay their not we, but the chapter pays their liability insurance. Their fees pay for property insurance, taxes, and everything else that goes on. And unfortunately, because brothers don't like to pick on other brothers, frequently they come around and swipe a meal at the house if they're on campus in class, and or come over on weekends and bring their dates and still don't pay. So my ears are open for ideas and suggestions.
Bill, I don't think your problem is uncommon.
I don't think it is either.
No. Have you considered maybe when new members sign up, having some sort of initiation fee that might cover their junior and senior year as an upfront cost, where they're still excited and enthused to be part of the organization, and you've already captured that money? So if they change their mind their junior, senior year, you've captured that. Kind of as a deposit, if you will, on their junior and senior year.
Well, we could raise our fee for everybody and tell them, and even explain to them that, to them and their parents, that X amount of dollars of this fee go towards living out of the house and the enjoyment they have with the fraternity. It's an idea.
I mean, don't all the chapters charge all the members a fee, whether they live in the house or not, to help support the common areas of the house to begin with? And then rent is just for those that live within the house. So I'm not really understanding. I mean, I would think all members of the chapter are paying a portion of the fee, whether they're in the house or not.
Well, we have three, I call them contracts, but I've had a lawyer tell me that if it smells like a lease, it is a lease. The house corporation separately rents the house to the chapter, total separate contract that the president of the chapter signs with me every year. Then there's another contract that the chapter has with each of the individuals who live in the house. A third contract or lease, it's not a lease, but a third contract, we call it a financial responsibility contract. And that's the contract that the people that live out of the house should be signing. And it goes to them and their parents from the company that manages our leases. But most of them don't sign it. Those that do know they're responsible. Those that don't, there's no way we can force them to sign it. That's the kind of coercing I'd like to learn about.
I just don't see where it's optional. I mean, in order to belong to the organization, there's a cost. And that's true whether it's our organization or any other. And those who are choosing to not pay, I mean, A, I'd be curious as to what percentage of the organization that is. And B, they don't see a value proposition to belong or not belong. And those who are paying are not taking responsibility to, if I have to pay and you're not paying, I'm not going to be happy about that. I'm going to call you out.
I agree with that, but the chapter president tries to collect the money. But it's a pretty high rate of those that live out of the house their senior year that, they move into these fancy apartments that are much more expensive than our house fee. And our house is fortunate. We're right at the main entrance of campus, where most fraternities are several blocks away. Excuse me. But those that don't pay just say, disaffiliate me. And I don't want to lose them as a possible donor in future years. And I'm sure Phi Gamma National doesn't want to lose them either.
I can appreciate that, but if they're not paying now,
those that live in the house, go ahead.
I'd be real curious. The loss of a future donor. I mean, if you were to go back a few years and look at who wasn't paying and examine how much did you collect from them after they graduated, you're probably not picking a whole lot up along the way. What did you really lose?
You're breaking up, but I've done that.
Okay. I mean, how many of the people who didn't pay at some point in their senior year are large donors down the road?
I don't know if it's. I don't know whether it's my connection or not, but most of what you said, Howard, broke up a little while ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. I would be curious to know, of those who are quote unquote freeloading, how many of those turn into reasonable future donors down the road? And you have enough of a chapter history to be able to look into that. And I'm willing to bet that not enough of them ultimately donate to make their freeloading worthwhile.
That's a good point. I mean, I can go back. This failure to pay has only been like within the last 3 to 4 years. Prior to that, anybody that moved out paid. I think older graduates had more of a commitment to the fraternity. I mean, most of our chapter officers, a lot of them end up being sophomores. First year they move in the house. Juniors don't want it, and seniors have moved out.
How about posting a list of those in the house that are not paying their fair share? And everybody knows.
We can do that.
And Bill, the other thing I might suggest is with the whole new member recruitment program, make it a very prominent part of that here are your responsibilities. I know Rob talked about that, you know, the program discusses what responsibilities of a member of Phi Gamma Delta will be. And I would add a little bit to it regarding financial commitment and what is required. And quite frankly, if they don't, you know, get their commitment then, and if they don't want to do it, then they don't need to be members.
Would it work to have that third contract signed upon initiation? Should I move out of the house, I agree to pay the out-of-house fee when they're excited, when they're first coming in.
You know, add that to their initial contract with the chapter.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Because then, I mean, being young, their parents, anybody who lives in the house, we don't have that problem. And the parents sign also.
Bill, the other thing I'd ask JB Gall on this call, JB, does Omega Phi have a way of collecting on that?
Yeah, we use Omega Phi very successfully, and they have an easy way of placing people into collections.
Okay.
And I think it's very fair. They have a letter or two, you know, before they even do anything. And we have used that in the past for people that live in the house. You know, if for some reason they just keep going and not paying, and we've been successful because the parents sign it also. But for out of house, you know, our fee is like $850 a semester, and once a year it's a $350 security deposit. You know, we've only had trouble with those that move out of the house into their fancy apartments where they can have their girlfriends come over and cook them dinner and do the dishes, and so forth.
So, JB, what are your secrets? Do you like slash tires? What do you do to collect the money?
A lot of it we don't collect. It's left up to, you know, our chapter has the contract with those individuals. It's up to our treasurer and the cabinet at the time to be stern with them. But as we all know, brothers don't like to pick on brothers. They don't like to report who broke that chair, you know, so they all chip in and pay. It's a lot different.
Well, it's good they all chip in at your house. That doesn't happen in Ohio.
Pardon me?
It's good that they all chip in and pay. That doesn't always happen at Ohio.
Yeah, that's true.
I think to Mark's question, I think this, if you have a good chapter, and this applies to the food service, this applies to living in the house, this applies to everything. The best chapters, the best house corporations, not just in Phi Gamma Delta, but in all the other fraternities, and recruitment, or what we now call joining, stress that there is a live-in requirement and that you accept an obligation to live in the house a year, 2 years, 3 years, but then based on the occupancy of the house, or your grades or your points, you may be relieved from doing so. Or, you know, if the house sleeps very little but has a robust food program, you know, if you're going to join this chapter and be a Fiji on this campus, you have to buy our lunch and our dinner plan. So I think the strongest chapters, you know, make sure during the joining process that there is a live-in component and they enforce it. And, you know, I've known some wealthy brothers who had a room in a chapter house, but had an apartment off campus, and he or his parents paid 2 rents, or he paid a penalty to live, to forego his room in the house. Now, that for some groups that may be hard to impose, but making sure there is a 100% expectation of a live-in requirement that meets the rent required from the chapter to the house corporation is, you know, the first big step to make.
JB, if they go into collections through Leg-Fi, exactly what do you do?
But Omega Phi works with 2 collection agencies. And it really depends. Every state has different collection rules and laws. But usually the first steps are the member is contacted by the collection agency, and they have 30 or 60 days to reply. And at that point, there could be some negotiating on, can I pay? Will you pay? Will you go on a payment plan, etc. Essentially, then there is no communication or no plan worked out. It is reported on his credit. And then oftentimes we see in 3 to 5 years, when he goes to buy his first house or buy his first car, he sees this credit report, and he quickly pays the obligation to have a clean report to buy a car or buy a house. So I always, you know, recommend to chapters that, you know, they should certainly turn people over to collections if it's warranted, but you certainly can't you can't balance your budget on collections revenue, because it could take 5 years, you know, to collect from the brother.
I think, Dave, if I'm not mistaken, and obviously JB knows a lot of it, the big word is enforcement. But I think Omega sends 2 letters out before it's actually placed with a collection outfit, if I'm not mistaken. We've used them, and after the first letter goes out and their parents get a copy of it, we've gotten paid for those kids that have lived in the house. Out of house, they don't even sign the agreement, our financial agreement. We do have, our chapter has bylaws, and the kids don't live up to the bylaws. So the big thing is enforcement. Just like I mentioned about a broken chair, they don't tell you who did it. So part of all of their security deposit pays to replace that chair.
So the letter goes out to the parents as well as the individual?
I'm sure it does, because it was the parents that called me and say, what do I do? And because my name's on the contract also from the House Corporation. And I tell the parents, pay up. If you need a program to pay over time, let's sign one. If not, send a check to Omega. They're the one that.
But because the contract's with the chapter has to initiate, if I'm correct, does the chapter have to initiate?
Yeah, but my name's on the contract too. The parent signs it. The person who rents the room from the chapter signs it. The chapter president signs it, and I sign it. I probably ought to change that to our BCA guy, but since I've been doing it for the last 10 years, my name's always been on it. And I write them and I make changes. And I'll make a change for next year about the initial contract they signed, saying there's an obligation if you move out of the house to pay a fee that's established at a later date. I don't know how really to word it now, but I will, because that's a good idea I think that Rod had.
So I think to address Dave's question, yes, in both Vault and Leg-Fi, an administrator on the account has to trigger the collections to start.
Yeah.
And I always advise that's the absolute worst, last case scenario. If you have a brother on the House Corporation or BCA that's a lawyer, have him send a letter to the parents first, all of those things, because the collection it's a hassle. And frankly, a lot of brothers don't want to put their brother in that position.
Right. I don't even know, JB, if a Gamma Phi brother who's a lawyer would want to write a letter like that to another Gamma Phi's parents. Years ago, if they lived in the house, we'd throw them out.
Yep.
Now you'd get sued if you throw them out of the house. Changes in the legal world.
Yeah.
Too many lawyers out there.
Hey,
Thank-
just as an aside, JB, thanks for the language of caveat. You know, it took me the longest time to move from rush to recruitment. And now I'm going to have to go from recruitment to joining. I'll get there. Just bear with me.
How about associate member?
I'll get there. Just bear
Nib.
with me.
They're called NIBs now, newly initiated brothers. Instead of pledges, they're called NIBs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Dio. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nate Dio, thank you. I know you put up with a lot.
Of course, no,
Well, I'm
thank you.
assuming there are
brother.
no more-
How's our new employee doing? What's his name? Alan? John Allen?
He's
John-
doing good. He's getting his footing underneath him, but he's doing
I've
well.
been copying him some of my emails to you.
Just
Okay.
before you go, are there any other questions or comments? Well, once again, brothers, thanks for attending. Thanks for all that you do for your chapters and for Phi Gamma Delta. And we'll be in touch. As I told you, we're going to be reaching out to every chapter. So look forward to talking with all of you.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, brothers.
Thanks.
Right on.
Thanks, y'all.